Welcome, everyone. My name is Marina Antunes, Festival Director for Spark Animation, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this session in our Meet the Filmmakers series, where we speak to filmmakers whose films have been selected to the festival. Very pleased to have with me today Marta Monteiro, the director of Cold Soup. Marta, welcome to Spark.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here talking to you about the film.
I wanted to, one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you about Cold Soup is because the film really spoke to me in a really interesting way that I wasn't expecting. And the title is, I think, the thing that strikes me the most. And we'll talk about the end of the movie in a minute. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the idea for the project and where that stemmed from and why you decided to tell this story now.
Well, actually, it's very, how do you say? It's not funny. It's kind of ironic story because when I decided I wanted to make a film, I wanted a change of tone, and I wanted to make a comedy. And I didn't. I ended up not doing it. But in order to make a comedy, I invited a Portuguese writer, illustrator, and comic author to write the script because she has a lot of sense of humor. And she deals with subjects that I'm also interested with, like feminism, LGBTQ plus rights, gender roles, well, you name it. And on our first meeting, I told her just this. I want to make a story about a female protagonist, and I wanted it to be funny. And think about it. You have all the freedom you can have. And on our second meeting, she brought me a 2-page story that she had done previously I think it was for a magazine. And it was a story that it was called The Soup. And it's the story that you see in the film. And I realized at that moment that I really liked the story, although it was not going to be easy to make it funny because it's a very heavy subject, right? And that's how it happened. I really liked how she ended the story, the grand finale. And I really like it, how it was very informative as well. So I decided it because I fell in love with the story and the subject. It's also something that I'm very concerned about as well.
How much of that story actually made it into the script? Because one of the things that I was really impressed by is, you hear survivors talk about their experience, and a lot of the times it's this, I stayed for this reason and I stayed for this reason. And there's always these justifications almost to yourself as to why you stayed. Was that all already in the story? How did that develop into the script that you have in Cold Soup?
Okay, so as I told you, I invited Joana to write the script, and the telling, what the character is narrating, stayed in the film. All the rest was specifically written for the words. I don't know if I'm being very objective. Yeah. Joana didn't stay to write the whole script. She just wrote a little bit, and then I ended up doing it. So I used, as I've already said, I used the narration. And that's it.
One of the things that is really impressive, you basically take us through the life of a woman in, mere minutes. How did you, I'm starting to get the sense that maybe some of those key moments came directly from the script, from the story that Joana had written. Was there anything that is in the film that wasn't in the original story?
All the action. What you see, it wasn't in the real story. But what you hear, it was in the original story. All the rest was, as I told you, I ended up doing the script myself. And because I'm not a writer, I wrote it with images while doing the storyboard and the animatic. That's my way of writing. Other things I ended up writing because sometimes you need to take a break, think, and actually write. organize ideas. But that's how it happened. Again, the text was already there, and I just added the action.
One of the things that comes through the story on a visual level in the visual storytelling is this motif of water. There's a lot of water, these images of like drowning, of feeling like you're drowning. How did that visual cue start to develop?
Well, it was, I wouldn't say by accident, but sometimes things happen by accident. While I was trying to find a way of illustrating the narration without actually showing what she's saying in a very literal way, I did an image where the woman is pouring the tea on the cup for her husband, and then the water keeps coming, and that ended up in the film. And when I did that, I realized, well, I can use this as a metaphor. The water, the idea of drowning, of suffocating, being in a relationship where you are suffocating, and that's how it happened, a little bit by chance. But then I realized I had something there, and took advantage of it.
Yeah, it works beautifully. And the first time you see it, there's that little bit of, in the back of your mind, you start to think, okay, this is very, very clear. And it's so beautiful as well. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing. Like, how did you achieve the look of the film? Because you have these backgrounds that are almost real, but it looks like they have some sort of, like you've done something to them to make them look also not real. And then you have these beautiful sort of pencil designs over top of the animation of the characters. How did you achieve that look? Because it's a little bit different than some of your other films. It still has some of the same sort of motifs and a feeling that's a Monteiro film, but it also feels quite different.
Well, I think it was a combination of several things. Now I'm more interested in collage, cutting up papers and doing compositions with it. But for the film, it was different. At the beginning, I wanted to make the film on an actual place, on an house, and do the animation, painting it on the walls. But then that became, well, kind of difficult to do for several reasons. One of them, it was because I had to be in a place for a long time, from a long period of time, and I didn't want that. I wanted to stay and work at home. So I decided maybe I can keep the drawing, and I'll find something for the scenarios, for the sets, for the background. And because I was interested in collage, I thought, well, let me try and do some experiences and see how this works. At some point, I realized that working with images that are taken from magazines or photographs has some kind of symbolic nature, because the character is telling a story that she recalls, something that happened. And well, at least for me, many of my memories are on photographs. Okay, so I kind of started collecting family photographs, mine and asked some friends, and I used many of them during the film. You don't really see it, but they are there. Other things, I try to look at magazines, mostly old magazines. So that's how it happened. And one thing I wanted was not to make a very realistic film. And collage, you can work with real images, but you can give it a sense of a surreal environment, something that is you recognize, but it's not exactly what you see.
And the film also has a very unique color palette. Can you talk a little bit the color story, which has these beautiful sort of like bluish tones and then a lot of red in different tones, and it's never super harsh, but there is definitely like a feeling of almost like a dread that's throughout in this, but it's also really beautiful. So how did you land on those colors?
Yes, well, again, it was trial and error, experimenting. And then for me, it's always like this. First, I just test, and then I see it's not if it's beautiful or not, but maybe if it has some meaning. And then I realized that red, it's a color that has a symbolic connotation that is usually associated with violence, which is the topic of the film. And the blue, it has to do with the water element. I wanted it to be recognizable as water. But it also has a little bit of green, which is you can associate with being angry or anger. I give as an example the Incredible Hulk. When he really gets very, very angry, he turns green, right? And I use I think it's the wheel of color, a color wheel, that the color wheel associated with emotions. And I looked for it, and then I realized that I was, how can I say this? I was in the right direction with the yellow, the blue, and the greens.
It works.
In terms of symbolic use of color.
Yeah, it's super effective, and you don't even really notice it until you're like partway through the movie and you realize that there is this very specific color palette, and then you look at the poster and you're like, okay, it's all there. It's all there. I mentioned at the beginning the last line of the film and that last scene. I don't think I'm ever going to forget it. Like when it happens, there's almost this feeling of cheer that this woman has broken out of this this relationship and the situation. But there's also like this mental image of like this cold soup, which to me just has this, I don't know, it has this staying power. Was that always going to be the last line of the film? How did you kind of like develop that final scene? Because it is so effective and so memorable.
Yes, it was always going to be the end of the film. And it was already in the work of Joana. So, and it was one of the reasons that I really like the story. It's how it ended, what she did, the main character, what she did in order to step out of the house, the objects that she stole. And again, in the end, what she I don't want to spoil the film, but what she left for the husband, which is something that, as I've been talking to different people, they have been giving me different feedback. It's very open to interpretation. Well, at least that's how I have been told. Some people see it as a defiant action. She's making a statement, a very strong statement. Others see her as being, I wouldn't say submissive, but she has been taking care of her husband throughout of all of her life. That's her final gesture of taking care. So it has many levels, I think, and that's one of the reasons that I like the story at first.
Oh yeah, it's super effective. I'm really curious about the reception for the film. It's out there playing festivals. What kind of feedback are you getting from people that are seeing it?
I haven't been to many festivals yet, and neither the film. Well, actually, I'm going to my first this weekend. So, but I received the feedback from people that work with me. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that was it from the audience. So far, not many, because I haven't. Well, actually, I've been to one festival where the film, how do you say, premiered here in Portugal, and people liked it, but that was it. I wasn't told anything else.
It's very effective. It's very, very, very memorable. You often tell, women's stories, and you mentioned right at the top that this is something that's very important to you. Are these themes that you want to continue to explore in your filmmaking?
Well, I would say yes and no. Yes, because it's something that I really care about. When I was starting, I was not just looking at films, but almost everything that I like comic books or illustration. And I saw many people creating stories about the male universe, or when it was the female universe, it was very the stories were very limited, or women were very objectified. Well, at least that was what I remember of a few years ago, and that's what it started, or me wanting to make films just about women. And no, because I think this is going to be my last film. Making animation, it's really, really hard work. And I usually say that I age 5 to 10 years every time I make a film. So maybe in a few years later, I will go back to animation. But right now, I'm really tired. And I probably will keep on telling stories, but using other how do you say, means? Or yes.
Well, I was going to ask what your next project was going to be and what was next for you, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope that in maybe 5 or 10 years you decide to come back to animation. Congratulations on Cold Soup. It's really a powerful piece of work, and it's really beautiful, and it's one that's going to stay with me for a long, long time. Really, congratulations and best of luck with that.
Thank you very much. That warms my heart. And it's very good to hear that, because of all the pain and suffering that comes from making a film, that's the best thing that I can hear. Thank you so much for the compliments and for having my film at your film festival. It means a lot to me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you again for your time.